Welcome to another episode of What If Civilization Started Over? We are on episode 41. In the last episode we saw a big event happening. A plague started to attack this world. It started all the way here in the colony of Orange, where one man got very sick and eventually other colonies got the virus. Brown and bronze, sea green and grey, gold, but also orange in Europe, and other countries were starting to get the virus. And if countries weren't careful, it was going to get out of hand pretty soon. But we also saw something pretty nice happening. In North Africa and Mid Africa is almost fully discovered and claimed by countries. And today we're going to look at many events that are going to happen in this world. We're firstly gonna take a look at the Democratic Alliance. We have of course peach, light cyan, violet and mustard in this alliance. But we recently got these two countries after the downfall of lavender that joined this alliance. But one country is still a very interesting one. Not this country that deviated from lavender. No, it's mustard. As the king himself still doesn't know what to do with his people, because he surely does know that there is a group forming that want him gone. But also there's a very large group that protects the king and that likes the king and the family and the bloodline. And one day the king is going to step on his balcony and talk to his people. And many people are gathering around the balcony and his palace where the king lives, where he is going to speak. And eventually when his first few words are spoken, a man stormed out on the balcony and killed the king. It happened so fast, the king was dead in less than 20 seconds. The Democratic Alliance was shocked because of what happened here in Mustard. A leader was killed by a group. And the group was against the king. They wanted the king gone. And they were so extreme that killing was their only option in their eyes. But the group that protected the king now was very angry and upset to the other group. And with that, Mustard was in a civil war. The lighter color defines the people that still followed the king, that liked the king. But the darker color was against the king and they killed the king. We see three main pockets appear that follow these extremists, and they are quickly to get rid of this small pocket that indeed still followed the king. This group want the capital in hand and they want democracy in their country. But when the other democracy countries get the news by this extreme group, they completely disagree what is happening. Democracy has to happen fairly. No war needs to happen to make democracy work in your country. But then this group raises their eyebrow, and especially towards Peach, as Mustard and that group alone already know, of course, what Peach did right here as well. They had influence in the war with Lavender, making the group that wants democracy in Mustard feeling less connected with Peach. We go a little bit more eastwards and we are at the border with Cyan and Dark Blue. A lot of things happened here, religious wise, as we all know. Cyan doesn't like the Dark Blue's religion, and that of course alone let this light pink country break away from Cyan. But Dark Blue and the leader himself, the king, is not happy with the northern neighbor. They know what they did. They know what Cyan has done for years on end to mock Dark Blue when they were still small, when Night Blue was still in the way. But now that Night Blue, and Silver as well, is gone and is just one border away, Dark Blue is closer and closer to their plan. But Dark Blue isn't stupid, as entering another country with a war act is going to activate the Shield Pact, as Cyan is in the Shield Pact. But Dark Blue isn't surely here to attack Cyan military wise. They don't really want to enter the country, they don't want to gain land from them. They want Cyan to crumble from the inside. Dark Blue is sending spies inside Cyan, and most importantly to the newly acquired areas, or mostly the most far away areas. The part underneath light red and the bottom of the boot of Italy. There a few men are operating and they are starting a rebellion against Cyan. And Cyan is completely unaware that dark blue is all behind it. As after a month or two, this group is starting a civil war against the government of Cyan, against the king, and as well the boot of Italy. But those were not the only areas where this rebel group started to pop up. Also this island and Cyprus. The king of Cyan was very confused why suddenly all these pockets started to pop up. And they thought they were satisfied that no one wanted to break away after Light Pink did it. But these 4 groups in total eventually just said to the king that now Light Pink did it, that they were next. But they had far more other intentions than just Light Pink, that they wanted to just break away. This group, this large rebel group, made it clear that they opened the war against the government of Cyan. Already some coastal areas were hit by this rebel group here in Greece. Other islands were cut by this group, as well as this coastal area and almost the city. They also came on land right here. Cyan shouted for help for the Shield Pact, but the Shield Pact didn't want to intervene as this was an internal problem, but as well as the Shield Pact was currently very inactive because of something else happening in this world. We don't need to forget the plague in Europe. Many countries stopped communicating with each other, some countries that were far away. Orange had some contact with Cyan, but now with the plague, Orange was far too busy with themselves, with the problem in their core. Many other countries started to not communicate with each other anymore. In Europe, Africa wasn't hit by this virus, as Red and Yellow got the knowledge of this plague and immediately shut everything down as much as they could. Yes, still people crossed this border with Dark Mint, but no one had the flu or the virus yet. But other areas started to grow massively and other countries almost got the plague completely. Bronze was hit very hard, as well as these Danish islands. This area as well, and it spread into Orange. The plague got very far inside of Orange. The north of Indigo was struck, as well as the west, but the rest was still very stable. But Magenta was now very careful with contact via Indigo and protected the border, and no one was let in or out anymore. Dark Mint was hit very hard again. There was almost no escape to this virus. Sadly, the rebel group against Cyan also had the virus, and even more people brought it to mainland Cyan. This whole area was hit by the virus. Even this part of Butter now. Seafoam Green got hit in the north, as well as areas around it inside Dark Mint. Almost the whole coastline of Reddish Pink was struck, and the northern island of Butter was hit as well. After a few months, the whole area of the capital of Gold was struck by this virus. And now the world, Europe itself, could really feel and notice all the deaths that were happening because of this. Eventually this whole section of Cyan was hit by this virus. But Green was also hit in their coastal areas, and they were hit very hard. Light Pink was luckily out of it, and the northern Russia and Siberian countries were also not hit by the virus yet. Coming back to the civil war of Mustard, the darker group gained more land. They reached the border of Dark Lavender, and people started to storm in places, and they wanted to gain as much land so that they could win this civil war. This northern group also expanded outwards, stretching more and more land. The democratic countries were unsure what to do. Should they intervene and kill the other groups? But they actually were rooting for democracy, and democracy countries don't really attack other democracy countries. But then Peach says, well, this group isn't considered a country. They are a rebel group. They are attacking another country, killing their old leader, and we didn't kill leaders. And to also clear something up, Peach had nothing to do with the murder of the original governor of Lavender, the last governor of Lavender, as they have now also a king. But Peach had nothing to do with it. The group in the south gained more land against the border of Dark Lavender and even Pastel Orange. The group enlarged and eventually marched towards the city, and they gained the city. But even more pockets started to pop up, and they are very in favor of this group. But this group was very extremist, and they eventually forgot where they actually were rooting for. They were done. They didn't receive help from any democracy country at all, and they thought they would get help, as they thought they were setting the plan in motion. If they would attack the king and attack the country, the democracy should just follow itself, but it never arrived. Finally, some parts were fight back with the army of Mustard, and this northern group was completely eradicated. But the south as well, a little bit. And they wanted to free the capital as much as possible, or well, get it far from the hands of this group. But then the southern settlement started to be in favor of this rebel group, of this civil war. It got larger and larger. It reached the border of Dark Lavender, and then it escalated far too much. Dark Lavender in the south is now providing resources to the so-called bad side of this civil war. They are funding the darker group. Why? Did Mustard ask. Even the other democracy countries asked why this Dark Lavender country was doing this. This dark group eventually got this southern province in their hands completely, with as well this little one. More and more people started to join this side of the civil war. Even this whole province eventually just did it. The other one as well here next to it. The southern one and the rest of this. And this province. It was just getting out of hand far too quickly. Then Mustard wanted to surrender over to this group. But then the pressure hit them, as the Democracy Alliance wanted to still help Mustard. But if they would surrender, they wouldn't. They would never intervene again. And especially these northern three, as the southern three were not really involved in this situation. They were sort of forgotten for now. It mostly were these three. Peach is of course the sort of leader of this whole alliance. And it was made very clear. It was so clear that they were made into the leader of this alliance. So now Peach could decide what the Democracy Alliance should do. And they even reached out to these southern two, finally. And they said, attack Mustard. At least the parts that were taken by this darker group. This group in the south started to attack the extremists, as well as this country. Violet was also ordered to attack the extremists, and they rescued this northern province. But this made this group think, the extremists, that the law book isn't maybe the way to go, as now they see a clear dominance, that Peach is leading this group, and they are ordering other countries to attack. And these countries in the south didn't really say that they were actually wanting to do this. Even Violet, it didn't really seem that they were actually for this plan. They just listened to Peach. But Peach said it was for the good way. This is the way to save Mustard from their downfall against these extremists. But the extremists felt like there was no equality inside these countries. There's always eventually one leader that decides what is going to happen, even in a bigger alliance. It's Peach. And in Peach itself, we have their leader, the president, that eventually orders something. These extremists, they wanted equality as well, but as well as a law book, that people indeed could vote. But was voting actually a thing that it was right to do? If you vote and eventually you vote for a man that eventually just decides everything in your country, just like a king always did, then there is no equality to other people. They wanted equality as much as possible. And these extremists eventually had their own idea. And so, communism was born. Back over to Cyan, where another rebel group reached mainland of Cyan, pretty close to the capital, as well as here in the main province. It was now very hot in the area, as the king didn't know what to do. He wanted still the people on their side, but it was just still too much for the king. And these rebels eventually entered the capital, demanding the king to step down. But the king didn't. Not yet. But this rebel group still demanded it, and if he didn't, more and more of his country was going to fall in the hands of these rebels. Provinces in the east, coastal cities, they were also hit, but also near the border of Dark Blue. And Cyan was like, why there, of all places? And Cyan didn't really seem that Dark Blue had a part in this, as they knew what happened here before, very long ago. Why these rebels were starting to pop up. It was very logical for Cyan, but still, they didn't want it to happen. This whole province was taken, and this other province was also closing to fall. And this was just the beginning of the civil war of Cyan, as suddenly another country joined this civil war. Lime opened the war against Cyan, but not against the Shield Pact. But Lime wasn't really worrying anymore, as they know what was happening in the world, and the Shield Pact, well, it was almost inactive because of the plague. Very quickly, 2 provinces were in the hands of Lime, and this was very confusing for the King of Cyan, as Lime hasn't attacked another country in centuries, as they did attack Brown right here with Magenta, but after that they never did something again. And this is why Cyan eventually figured out, at least they thought they figured it all out, that Lime was after the whole rebel groups that were popping up, and not exactly the blue religion. The rebels, they didn't say specifically that they were against the genocide, they were just against the king. And at first, the king of Cyan thought that it was because of the genocide and because of the blue religion, but now his focus was fully on Lime. The king of Green, nearby, knew what was happening and actually wanted to help Cyan, but was unable to respond because of the plague. And now another province was almost in the hands of Lime. Eventually it was, circling in this small province and also taking it. And this island over there, and this island. The rebel group eventually figured out that Lime was attacking, and they saw this as an opportunity to let Cyan completely crumble. More provinces were taken by the rebel groups, as more people just started to volunteer for this rebel group. Whole provinces taking the ideas of this rebel group, and it indeed were done with Cyan after all these years. Even this southern province, with these islands in the south, and this province also. Lime now was attacking this province, but Cyan didn't really attack back, as there was never an exact order to attack. There was just Lime opened the war against Cyan, but Cyan never opened the war against Lime. Well, why? This is why. The king of Cyan was killed by the rebel group. So there was no leader that was going to say attack Lime, as the rebels were now in charge. And they were in favor, and they made eventually an agreement with Lime. Eventually the one man from Dark Blue that was settled here for this rebel group arrived in Lime. And Lime and indirectly Dark Blue made an agreement after years Remember that Lime was here very long ago, and they had a border with Dark Blue, making this an historical moment for both countries. And they made an agreement to not attack each other, but to just attack Cyan. And to take over parts they want, so that Cyan was crumbling from the inside. Now with 2 civil wars, in the meantime the plague was expanding as well again. As Orange finally cut the plague as well in Britain, and the whole southern coast was hit by this virus. People were just not understanding what was happening. They knew people were getting sick, they knew what actually was happening, but they didn't really do anything about it. People were just ignorant and they still wanted to just go on with their lives, but they had to stop. And eventually the king just ordered that people just had to stay in their villages, in their town, in their city, in their settlement, and not do anything else outside of that. But humans, the civilians, were not listening. They just wanted to get on with life. Bronze eventually was completely hit by this virus. Going over across the Atlantic Ocean, the colony of Bronze was hit hard with this virus. The main areas were hit, but not the outskirts. The whole island of Cuba was hit, that was claimed by Brown. This island in the south, and this island as well, and more of the coastal areas of Brown was hit. Panama was also hit as well, yes, and other wealthy settlements. But then something happened that was pretty positive, and that happened inside of Gray, as the plague was actually stable, and even as the plague was slowly just disappearing inside of Gray. Gray had it all handled. Eventually, even this settlement was freed from the virus, and more outskirts started to just not having the virus anymore. This was pretty obvious, but it was not clear why Gray saw the virus disappearing slowly. Gray had no cure. Medicine wasn't really a thing yet, not the way you know it in our world nowadays. It was just slowly disappearing. But Orange was hit hard, and now the whole northern part of the country was hit, with only just a few settlements not hit yet by it. Magenta, sadly now, wasn't free of the virus yet, as people crossed the border and entered the capital of Magenta, making this part also affected by the virus. This coastal area of Gold was hit, these islands above, and this coastal area. With this coastal area and this coastal area, it was spreading rapidly, and it got seen near the border of Dark Pink, making Dark Pink very scared to get the virus. But then they knew eventually that the virus actually was already seen in their country, as it was seen right here. People had crossed the border from Indigo through Pink, eventually to Dark Pink, and people had it. So it was also seen right here in Pink. Pink and Dark Pink were now not free from it either. The center of Indigo was hit as well, as the south too. This virus quickly claimed more lives than ever. Worldwide, more than 10,000 of people died by this virus. But it was still not seen in Africa, or in Mesopotamia, or in Asia. It was purely in Europe where this virus was spreading. After a while, all of Orange was hit by the virus. But not this island. This island was in isolation, as they knew what was happening outside. More of Dark Mint was hit by this virus. In the north, against the border of Magenta, these settlements weren't happy. These settlements weren't free from the virus as well. And eventually the whole Dark Mint country was hit. The whole boot of Italy was hit. The southern island of Butter and Sicily was hit. And now all of Orange was hit, even in Britain. And this virus had Central and West Europe hard. Even Green started to see more of the virus, and people started to die more quickly now. The virus was adapting. The virus was evolving, making their victims die quicker, seeing more symptoms faster, and it was faster quickly. The virus wasn't airborne, and it never will be. But this virus was deadly. It was aggressive. Even Dark Cyan had the virus now, as the large parts of Indigo were hit and they too had contact with one another. But after that, in the colony of Dark Grey, the virus slowly disappeared. The virus also disappeared in Sea Green in the colony. And parts were starting to just see that it was better. This island was completely free of the virus, making people think that North America was more virus-free than ever. Eventually Grey had no more virus. They eradicated the virus completely. How? They don't know. It just disappeared one day and it was never seen again. Grey was of course very paying attention which boats entered their ports and if people were sick. Slowly but surely, more of Sea Green was virus-free and eventually almost fully virus-free. Only just the south. But after a few months, the virus just disappeared. The story was just so different in Europe and there were so many casualties. But there were also casualties made purely human-based, as Dark Coral attacked the extremists, the communists. But they also attacked back and killed a lot of forces from Violet. And they also made this gap close. And just less and less of normal Mustard was still there. The Democratic Alliance saw this as a lost opportunity. And even Peach eventually just said to the countries that were attacking it, there is no cause. Leave, now you still can, and evacuate your army. So the Coral country did it. This country in the south did it. And after that, Mustard, slowly but surely, was encircled by the communists. More and more people of the Mustard that followed still the king were killed, as now this group was turning really extreme. The capital was still not in the hands of the communists, and it just slowly but surely encircled the capital in until they couldn't really go much further, as there were many troops still fighting for the king that saw it not as a lost cause, and they still could win if the Democratic Alliance would intervene. But after weeks of waiting, the Democratic Alliance never did that again, and Mustard was completely taken over by the communists. And after this civil war, Mustard left the Democratic Alliance, as well as their economic one. There was a new government in place. Mustard was back, but more extreme than ever. Because now not only democracy was known to man, but also communism.